Hey, what's up guys? It's Rick with the Digital Divide, and today I want to take a look at the PlayStation 2. It's one of my favorite consoles ever made, second only to the Sega Saturn, but it is very close. This is also the best-selling console of all time, with over 155 million units sold throughout its lifespan. Now, there were a total of over 4,000 games released on this platform, so it's going to be impossible for me to cover everything in one video, but this is going to require many videos to cover all of the games I want to talk about. Up first, we've got Draken the Ancient's Gate. This is without a doubt one of the best action RPGs ever made. It is a gigantic quasi-open world. The combat is amazing. Every time you change armor, it actually reflects on your character, as do the weapons, and this is one of the first games I ever played where that happened. You can mount a dragon and fly around and fight other dragons, and you can get off or on the dragon whenever you want to help you traverse the environments. This is just a massive, beautiful, fun game, and I cannot recommend it enough. When I started collecting for the PlayStation 2, this is the very first game I went out and picked up because I was dying to replay it again. And one day I hope that they remake this game from the ground up for modern platforms like PC or the PlayStation 5. It's just so good. There's a huge variety of locations. This game had real-time shadow casting, which was something I hadn't seen in a ton of PlayStation 2 games, and it's just a whole lot of fun. Highly recommended. The next game I want to talk about is Splashdown, specifically Splashdown Rides Gone Wild, which I believe is the second entry in the series. This game is just pure arcade fun. As you can see here, it is very much like Wave Race, except the levels are gigantic and they change while you're racing them. So you could finish one track where it's bright and sunny outside, and then in the very next track there's a rainstorm going on, and this would all happen in real time. The graphics were super impressive at the time. It had a rock-solid frame rate, and it was just so much fun to play. You were basically driving around through like theme park environments with like dinosaurs or, you know, carnivals or haunted houses. It's just so much fun, and it's one of those games where you can turn your brain off and just have fun for an hour or so, and then turn it off. And I highly recommend this one. The next game I want to talk about is Onimusha. This game came from Capcom, and it came during a time where Resident Evil was at the height of its popularity, and they kind of wanted to branch off and create another game in that vein, but without any horror elements. And so this game was created for the PlayStation 2, and it was so much fun. It takes place in a fantasy world where you're playing as kind of a samurai character. Every time you kill your enemies, you absorb their essence or their soul, and then you can use that to upgrade your points and level up. Again, this followed Resident Evil in that it had static two-dimensional backgrounds, but everything else was in 3D. The combat was very satisfying, and this one is such a great game, and there was a sequel or two that came out afterwards. The next game I want to talk about is Buzz the Mega Quiz. I had so much fun with this game, and when you bought it, it came with 4 Buzz controllers that you could use to buzz in and answer questions. You could play with up to 4 players, and there were a huge number of categories, including music, movies and TV, sports, lifestyle. You could mix it up. It was just so much fun. The host of the game was very charming. He kind of looked like a Muppet. And then you could pick your avatar, and there was just a lot of humor here. This is a really great game to sit down with a group of friends and play, or just a family-friendly, like family night.
Row the lot of you. Nice.
Who is Springfield's lazy and incompetent chief of police?
Like a burglar in a pet store, you've taken the lead.
The next game I want to talk about is Kinetica, and this is an odd futuristic racing game where you wear this robot suit and you have a wheel that is controlled on your hands and on your feet, and you're running around these gigantic sci-fi inspired courses, a lot of variety here. There's some that you're racing around in the sky, there's some you're racing around in futuristic cities, you're in the forest, you're all over the place. And when this game came out, you know, it's not the best racing game I've ever played by any stretch of the imagination, but it was so unique at the time. If I'm not mistaken, this ran at a rock-solid 60 frames per second. The game kind of reminds me of F-Zero in that it's super fast. It's like a mix between F-Zero and Wipeout, and I recommend it if you can find it. I think it got remastered for the PlayStation 4 not too long ago. The next game I want to talk about is Blood Omen 2. This is a Legacy of Kain series where you play as the aforementioned vampire Kain. This game was so much fun to play. It came out on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. It's a big, sprawling, gothic adventure in the city where you are running around. You can fight enemies, you can suck the blood out of their bodies, which refills your health after you defeat them. You have all sorts of vampire powers where you can turn into mist and sneak up on people. The game was just so much fun, and I really enjoyed it when it came out. And this one's not too expensive, so if you find it in the wild, highly recommend picking it up. The next game I want to talk about is Time Crisis 2. This is just an arcade perfect port that released on the PlayStation 2 alongside the light gun peripheral, which I gotta say I miss these games a lot. They were just a lot of fun. I'm a sucker for arcade games that you can pick up and play with a buddy for just a few minutes and doesn't require a huge amount of time or thought. This game was just so much fun when it came out, and especially with the light gun, I highly recommend picking this one up. The next game I want to talk about is Shadow of the Colossus, and this is one of the top 10 best games ever made. It is an absolute work of art, and this studio in general produced a lot of classic titles for the PlayStation 2. Before this one, there was a game called Ico, which had very similar aesthetic design and equally as fun to play. That came out earlier in the lifespan of the console. This was just a massive open world game where you discover this girl who is either dead or dying, and you had to traverse this gigantic open world and hunt down every one of the colossi in the world and kill them. And it has this weird dynamic where you kind of start feeling bad for the giant creatures because they're not doing anything to you, so you're actively seeking out all of these guys to kill them, and they're gigantic. You ride around on your horse and you hold your sword up in the air and it kind of points you to where the next one is. You have to find a way to get on top of these creatures and kill them. And at first, it's really overwhelming, but then once you get the hang of it, it is so much fun. I can't recommend this one enough. The next game I want to talk about is Sledg Storm. Now, this game was actually the sequel to a PlayStation 1 game called Sledg Storm. This one's not called Sledg Storm 2, but the original was just as fun with an awesome soundtrack. This game, when it came to the PlayStation 2, was kind of folded into EA's big moniker, and this is like an exaggerated sports label that they used, similar to SSX. If you've played that game, this is very similar to that, and it was so much fun. And all of these courses are huge and arcadey and exaggerated and just a whole lot of fun. This is one of my favorite racing games on the PlayStation 2, and I highly, highly recommend it.
It takes more than that to scare me.
Hey, is that TJ and Tracy down there?
You know he's looking for a win here today.
He's gonna have to look pretty hard because he's a loser.
The next game I want to talk about is Cold Winter. This was a very gritty first-person shooter. It was a spy thriller kind of shooter where you are broken out of prison. You're broken out of prison by your partner early on in the game, and this game is a mix of espionage and spy tactics. It is a shooter at heart, and it is a very violent one. If you've ever played the game Soldier of Fortune, this reminded me a lot of that. Whenever you shoot an enemy, it is very visceral. Like if you shoot an enemy in the head, their head basically explodes and you can shoot off all of their limbs. This one is definitely not for kids, but it has a sense of realism and physics around the combat that you just don't see too often when it came to the PlayStation 2. This game was so much fun, and it is actually relatively cheap. If you hop on eBay, you can pick it up, and it's well worth playing through even today.
This must be it. Kim.
The next game I want to talk about is an absolute classic, Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Now, I actually really like the PlayStation 2 version. Most people played this on the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3, but the PlayStation 3 version in particular had a really, really rough frame rate, and it could dip to unacceptable levels, in my opinion. The PlayStation 2 version ran at a rock-solid frame rate, never dips, no matter how much action is on screen, and it has a much more cartoony, colorful aesthetic to it, which I really liked. It has literally every single Marvel character you could ever want or hope for, and you can play the overwhelming majority of them, and each one is a joy to play, and I love this game. The next game I want to talk about is Beautiful Joe. Now, this originally came out on the GameCube, and it was an amazing game on the GameCube, but later got ported to the PlayStation 2 and is just as good on this console as it was on the GameCube. I cannot recommend this enough. It's got a comic book style aesthetic where you're playing as the superhero named Joe, and you have a bunch of powers where you can slow down time, you can turn into multiple versions of yourself, you can speed up time. This game just had so many fun and unique gameplay mechanics that you hadn't seen before it. And this was a brand new original IP, so it was a breath of fresh air and is still so much fun to play today. And this one also got a sequel that I recommend as well. The next game I want to talk about is God of War 2. This game is incredible. The first God of War was great, but when God of War 2 came out, it cemented this franchise as one of the best and most important in Sony's portfolio. God of War 2 took what was a great action game and elevated it to the point of being a must-play franchise and series going forward. And every title in the God of War franchise after 2 has been a tentpole event. And then they kind of rebooted the series on the PlayStation 4, and it's just excelled with every new title. Next game I want to talk about is Silent Hill 3. This is one of my favorite entries in the franchise. This one was super creepy. I really liked Silent Hill 2, but I think they were kind of struggling to grasp the PlayStation 2 hardware with that entry. I think they really refined the engine that they used for these games with the third entry, and it is so much fun, and again, super creepy. Great atmosphere. If you're into horror, I cannot recommend this one enough. I'm actually not sure what it goes for on the market today. I think I picked it up a long time ago, and I spent like $20 on it, I think. back in the day. So I'm not sure if this one's one of the more valuable ones to collect, but if you can get your hands on it for a reasonable price, definitely worth playing through it, especially during the Halloween season.
Hey, wait, what's going on? Where is everybody? Those weird monsters?
They've come to witness the beginning.
The next game I want to talk about is Ratchet & Clank, specifically Up Your Arsenal, which was one of the later titles in the Ratchet & Clank series. So this series did get its start on the PlayStation 2, and the first and second entries were great games, but when it comes to Up Your Arsenal, Insomniac had a number of games under its belt at that point, and they were very familiar with the PlayStation 2 hardware, and this game is kind of a culmination of all of the great gameplay and idea concepts that they started with on the first few titles, and really refined here, and it was so much fun. You could play as both Ratchet and Clank. It was a really long, family-friendly action-adventure game. The combat mechanics and the variety of guns that you could play as were just hilarious and super fun. Highly recommend this one. Next game I want to talk about is Gran Turismo 4, and to this day, in 2023, I have this game and I play it and it still impresses me. The graphics are unbelievable when you consider the hardware that they launched on. It had full body reflections on the cars, it ran at a rock-solid 60 frames per second, it supported some of the highest resolutions that the PlayStation 2 was capable of. This is just an unbelievable racing game, and it fully supported online play, and it was just so much fun and so ahead of its time. I think this is one of the best racing games that Polyphony Digital ever made. The next game I want to talk about is Area 51. Now, this is an overlooked but very fun arcadey first-person shooter that came out on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. And this game is really, really fun. Some people thought it was a bit too silly, but the gameplay mechanics and graphics at the time that it came out, I thought were very impressive, and I had so much fun with this. This game supported dual-wielding guns, which is kind of dumb, but you were wandering levels, you were looking for hidden top-secret documents, and then fighting off aliens that are invading the world. And the story wasn't incredible, it was very basic, but the gameplay was so much fun, and I can't tell you how many hours I spent with this one. Highly recommend it if you can find it for cheap.
Hit me! Stop it!
Next game I want to talk about is called Star Ocean Till the End of Time. This is a Square Enix RPG that I really enjoyed playing, and this one, when it came out on the PlayStation 2, I thought the visuals were miles ahead of any other RPG that I had played on the PlayStation 2 up until this point. Obviously, there were a ton of Final Fantasy RPGs that they released as well, which I will talk about in other videos, I'm sure. But this one, for some reason, really, really touched me. I love the combat. I love the visual design and aesthetics and the variety of environments. You'd be wandering a desert one minute and then you're on the beach the next minute, and the graphics, especially the water, was really, really cool looking at the time, and this game just had a grandiose scale to it that pulled me in from the get-go. Next game I want to talk about is Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. This game is the first in the series and still my favorite. It is so much fun. I was blown away when I played this game because it ran at a rock-solid 60 frames per second on the PlayStation 2 with these huge, vast environments with almost no pop-in whatsoever. This game was so much fun and so impressive. It took the ideas and concepts of something like a Mario 64, for example, but just elevated it to 10. It's just, everything's bigger, there's more variety, the world is gigantic, it's smoother. And this series went on to get multiple sequels, and I, for the life of me, can't figure out why they have not made a new one. This would be an amazing series to bring back to the PlayStation 5. The next game I want to talk about is Boulders Gate Dark Alliance. Believe it or not, this was the first Boulders Gate game that I have ever played, and I absolutely loved it. From the moment I started the game to the moment I finished it, I was absolutely hooked. A lot of you guys are playing Boulders Gate 3 now. That is definitely a Game of the Year contender, but if you want to play some of their earlier games, this is a great one to revisit. I think the graphics look super impressive even today, especially on the PlayStation 2 when this came out. When you change your armor or weapons, it's all reflected in-game on the character. It's got a top-down perspective, so if you're not into that Diablo-esque point of view, then maybe this isn't for you, but if you don't mind that camera angle, then this is so much fun. The combat is super satisfying. You can get a variety of spells and upgrades and different classes, and it's just, I can't recommend this one enough. It's game I want to talk about is Soul Calibur 2. This is without a doubt one of the best fighting games ever made. Namco really upped the amount of customizability in this entry. Every character has a variety of different skins to give them a unique look. All the weapons have variants for the same purpose to give it some variety. When this game came out, every console got a unique character. The GameCube got Link from the Zelda series, the Xbox got Spawn. The PlayStation's exclusive character came from Tekken. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name because I'm going to butcher it, but in my opinion, it was the weakest of the exclusive characters that all the consoles got, but the game itself is just as good as the other versions. It ran at a perfect frame rate, super smooth, graphics were amazing, highly recommended. The next game I want to talk about is Psyops, the Mindgate Conspiracy. This game was so much fun. It came out on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and it was one of the first games that really utilized the Havoc physics engine. You could pick up characters, toss them around the environment. You could pick up objects in the environment to manipulate them as well. And they all had a realistic sense of weight to them. And not only that, but the gameplay was fun. The shooting and weapon mechanics were solid. So it wasn't a one-trick pony. This game also had a really great soundtrack. It's got some horror elements. It's got a lot of espionage and intrigue. And some really cool puzzles as well that are based around the physics abilities. So highly recommend this one. It is so much fun to play, even today. And last but definitely not least is Devil May Cry. This is an absolute classic. There are so many franchises that got their start on the PlayStation 2, and this is one of those games. And even today, the visuals kind of blow me away because unlike Resident Evil or something like Onimusha, all of the backgrounds are now completely 3D. Prior to this, a lot of Capcom games utilized two-dimensional backgrounds with three-dimensional characters. Not only was this game completely 3D, but it was really, really impressive looking 3D. The scale was just out of this world at the time, and this game was just such a breath of fresh air because when it released, it was a brand new IP that nobody had heard of, with 60 frames per second gameplay, amazing combat, really great story, and just a cool gothic themed environment. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed this game, and I played all of the sequels. Devil May Cry 3 is another must-play on the PlayStation 2. And the series remains popular today. Devil May Cry 5, I believe, is the most recent entry, and you can play that on modern platforms. So that's going to do it for me today, guys. This video is getting really long, and again, there are thousands and thousands of must-play games on the PlayStation 2. These are just some that I recommend that came to the top of my head when I started making this video, but there are so many that I'm going to have to make several videos to get through all of them. But let me know in the comments below, what are your favorites?